so today I'm going to be showing you how to build a cinematic drone. Now, I'm also going to make this as a beginner's guide, so I'm going to cover the details as fast as possible and help you understand what everything does and why it does that. Now, the idea here is to build a cinematic drone that does not require a GoPro, such as this one right here. Now, this is the same exact frame. This is from Diatone. It's called the GTR something. I have it linked down below. This is the 4S version, and this is what I'm currently flying right now. This is the thing that I fly the most currently. I really love it. It's efficient, affordable, and the components are readily available, so if you ever burn something, you're easily going to find it, and they're budget components, which is really great, and it performs like a high-end quadcopter because it is a high-end quadcopter. However, don't let the budget fool you here. So this is a really great little beast that I'd highly recommend also if you didn't want to build your own. So now let's take a look at the components and then start building. All right, so here we have the Diatone frame, and for the flight controller and ESC, what we're going to be using is the F722 Mini. And again, everything here is linked down below. Now, the flight controller is basically the brain, and the ESC is the thing that controls the motors or allows the power to go to the motors. So this is the flight controller. The ESC is currently inside the quadcopter right here. So I've already just set it up there to make my life a little bit easier. And this is the way I recommend doing a build. Now, I like to approach the build with starting out with the wires that connect to the flight controller, which we'll cover in a bit. For VTX, I've decided to go with the Rush Tank VTX. I want to try this one in the real world. And it should do pretty good because everybody speaks so highly of. And again, it's linked down below. It takes an MMCX port, which is really great because we can use antennas such as this one here, and we don't have to have anything sticking out of the quad. For receiver, what's going to allow me to control the quadcopter, I'm using an XM Plus, an FRSky XM Plus. These are really cheap, really great, and they do a pretty good range as well. I think I've gotten around 3 kilometers of range on this, so they're really great. You're not going to have any issues with any of those. For camera, this is where it gets interesting. Now, this camera has been released called the Caddx Tracer. I haven't tested it myself. I've seen a couple videos online, but this is going to be my test for the Caddx Tracer here. And what this does is it'll allow you to record 4K footage and 1080p footage, and also broadcast it down to your goggles live video feed, which is something really great, and it'll save a lot of weight without adding that GoPro, like I showed you before. I think it's going to be great. Hopefully the quality is good as well, and time will tell here. Now, for motors are pretty interesting here. Motors, I'm using the T-Motor F40 2400 kV. This is a 4S build, and the reason why I like these motors is because they are really, really efficient and really, really powerful. However, there's a little twist to them. As you can tell here, there's no prop nut, and it has these little circles. Well, these are the Popo edition, and this makes your life a lot easier, in my opinion. They're a bit more expensive, but it does make your life a lot easier. For example, adding a propeller. You know, it's super simple. You just drop it on, get something kind of small, just push that middle part, slide it in, and just twist it until you see that thing pop back up. And now this thing is secure into place. And if you want to remove it, just push that little button in, twist the motor a little bit, and then it'll stay down like that. And then you can just easily pull it out just like this, which is really great. I really like that. It's going to make my life a lot easier in the field. And after a while, you'll come to appreciate this little feature here because it's just such a time saver, and it's just really nice to have for quick prop changes. Now, if you're planning on getting serious into drone building, I'd highly recommend this tool. Even if not, this tool just comes with every single hex driver you're going to need. These 4. Usually we use 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3 millimeter, but you're mostly going to be using the 1.5 and 2 millimeter. And what's really nice is easily drop that on. In the field, this is a must-have, and it just takes such a small amount of space, which is just less gear to carry along with you. And these are titanium coated, and I've been using it for quite a while now, which I highly recommend. So I'll have everything here again linked down below. All right, so let's get started here. The first step I like to do is start soldering up the camera wires here. And this is currently the camera wire that came with the camera. And usually they're all color coded exactly the same. Red is going to be the 5 volt, ground is going to be the black is going to be the ground, and the yellow usually is the video feed here. And what I like to do is strip them, twist them, and add some solder to them. Now let's go ahead and find camera, 5 volt, and ground. And if we take a look at this little board here, we see we have 5 volt, ground, and cam right there. So those are going to be on the top 3 right here. So 5 volt is going to be the red wire. All right, so I like to just add solder on there first before anything. Now this can be a little bit tricky because they are pretty tiny. Okay, you want to make sure they don't touch each other. That's looking pretty good. All right, so first we have 5 volt. Now 5 volt is going to be all the way at the edge right here. Now I'm right-handed, so I'd highly recommend you start with the left side, because if you have the soldering iron, then it's just going to be easier to go like this instead of solder here and then try to get to the other side. So right now this is going to be 5 volt, so I'm going to heat up the pad, and then I'm just going to bring in the wire and then just drop it into place. And that looks great. Next we have ground, which is going to be the black wire here. All right, I'm just going to hold it into place, make sure it's going to go in just nice. I'm going to heat up the pad first and then kind of bring in the wire and then just press on the wire once it's into place. And that's great right there. Next we have the cam, which is going to be the video feed. So, and again, I'm going to do that same technique. I'm just going to heat up the pad. Make sure you're comfortable before you do this, because the last thing you want is to get solder on any of the other components on the board here. So also pre-check it. Now this is very far away from me, so yeah, but it's looking really great. And I also like to twist these wires. It keeps them pretty clean. Now, if you notice this little extra wire, this is a remote control for that camera, because obviously it has some extra features. It's still the same basic concept. Red, black, yellow. That's it. Which is red is 5 volt, black is ground, and the yellow is the video. All right, so this next step here, it might be slightly tricky because we're going to connect the VTX, which is the video transmitter. That's going to transmit the live video feed. And if we bring in the wire here, we see that we have 4. We have a yellow, red, black, and white. Now, why do we have that? Well, one of them is something called smart audio, which will allow you to change the channel and power that you're broadcasting on through the on-screen display in your quadcopter. Which here, it's going to be the yellow wire, which I don't know why they did that color coding, but yeah, you can usually figure that out from the instruction manual. And if we also grab the video transmitter itself and we plug in this wire into place and flip it upside down, it'll actually tell us what wire does what. So we see the first one is DC, which means battery voltage, very important. Then the next one is ground, as you can tell it's black. And SA is smart audio, which is the system that allow you to change your channel and what power you're broadcasting at. And then as you can tell, that last one right here is the video. So yeah, you could solder direct to these, but I prefer to go ahead and stay. And this thing also has a 5 volt regulator in ground for a camera, but we're not going to be using that because we're using the power from right here, and that's why we took the 5 volt in ground from here. Now here it's slightly tricky, which is really nice because it gives you a little idea of what could happen. So it says 5 volt ground, TX3 and VTX. Now you might think this is really convenient to connect your video transmitter because look, VTX is right there, which is the video feed. TX3, that's where your smart audio would go. And then ground and 5 volt. But then you have to remember, this doesn't take 5 volt. It takes more. It takes battery voltage. So what we'll have to do is we'll connect the ground TX3 VTX here, but then the red wire, we're going to come all the way to something called VCC here because that'll give it the battery voltage. And that would be this little pin right here. So let's go ahead and do that together. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the connector here. And we're going to add solder to these. So here's the VCC. This is going to be the battery voltage. That's what's going to apply power or give power to that VTX right there. As you can tell, VCC right here. And this is VCC. And then next we have ground TX3 and VTX. So we're going to skip one. We're going to skip down because that's 5 volt and we're not going to need that because we're taking it from that corner. But we're going to need those 3 right there. Okay, so I'm going to trim these, make them a little bit smaller. Okay, so we said we're going to skip 5 volt. So let's go to ground, which is going to be the black wire here. So we skipped 5 volt. We're going to go to ground. It can get a little bit difficult, especially if you're far away like me trying to record everything. Okay, so we have our ground into place, just double checking because it's really far. All right, next we have TX3, which for this one is going to be yellow. Usually the yellow is the video or the VTX or whatever you want to call it, or the video output they would call it. But here for some reason it's the smart audio, so it's going to go to the TX. Now the TX3 is basically, it means like USB port 3 on the flight controller. Usually I have a couple of those, and yeah, that's what you're taking advantage. Now there's usually an RX3 and a TX3. And the T is always to transmit and the R is to receive. So if you want this to receive something, you'd put it on the R. If you want it to send something, you'd put it on the T because it transmits. And this is going to transmit the information to the VTX to change the channel and all these types of crazy good stuff. Now the next wire over is going to be the VTX, which is going to be the video output. For some reason it's white. Usually white is smart audio, but always just double check your documentation. So let's put this guy into place here. And everything looks great. Now the last one is going to be the power, which we said we needed battery voltage, which we're going to take from that corner right there, which we currently saw that one right there, VCC. So that's where we're going to place that guy. I like to heat up the pad first and then bring in the wire and just squeeze it on, and looks great. So now we've finished our camera, and we've also finished our VTX here. And it's really good to always double check, especially when they're this small. Usually they're not this small. This is because this is a small board. It's a 20 by 20 board. So now the last thing we have to do to this is just basically connect our receiver, and we're almost done. It's really that simple with these. That's what's really nice. So here for the receiver, this is going to be ground. This is going to go to 5 volt, and this is going to go to the S bus. So it's very important here. So if we look back at our, if you want to call it a manual, we see ground, 5 volt, PPM, S bus. Now we're going to have to go to S bus, 5 volt, and ground. Now this is very important. If you have I bus, like a fly sky, you would also connect it here on the S bus, but only if it's an F7. If it's not an F7 and you have I bus, then you'd want to connect it to an R that's not being used. For example, here we have R5, RX5. That's where you'd want to connect it. And in the UARTs, in the ports tab in Betaflight, you'd want to set that up as serial RX. And as time goes on, you'll get to understand that. It sounds a bit complicated, but it's just a couple of things you have to do, which you'll end up remembering. So let's add solder. We needed the ground. So this is going to be ground right here. And then we also needed 5 volt. And we also needed S bus, which is this one here. All right. Okay, great. All right, so I got myself a pair of tweezers here. It's going to make my life a little bit easier, and it'll make your life easier as well. Make sure your forearms are rested on the edge of the table. And this is so far, I think I just bridged 2 together. That's fine. We'll see it in a bit right now. So I'm just going to double check this because it's really far. Yeah, so right now I bridged the 5 volt and ground, and that could be a nightmare right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove both of them here. There we go. And then we can just, you know, scrape it off like that. And then usually that'll be good. It's because I tried to solder on top of the ground because I couldn't see it. There we go. So that's going to go right here. And a nice technique is when you see the tip of the soldering iron look like this, okay, we'll move that away. Never solder on top of the flight controller because it could just drop a couple. So just add some solder to it. Let it just, you know, sit for a while and then just clean it off. And then you want it to always look shiny and clean. So now for the flight controller, we're basically done. We have our VTX, we have our camera, we have our receiver, and then to connect this to the ESC, what's really nice is you have this little connector, which would go in here, and then it'll connect to the ESC, which we'll get into that step just in a tiny bit now. All right, so now let's go ahead and prepare the ESC. As you can tell, we have our power pads here, and then we should have 6 pads on each side. We have 6 pads here and 6 pads here, because each motor has 3 wires. As you can tell right there. So right now I like to start by adding the solder to the pads here. And usually with bigger ESCs, if it's a good one, then sometimes it's a little bit difficult to add solder to the ground pad because the board's heat dissipation would be really great and the ground is just basically all over the board. So right now just take your time doing this. You can tell it's a nice little blob right here. See, right now we just got to the ground. And it's getting really, really tough. That means this board has really great heat dissipation. Okay, and that looks good. Now move the tip just very carefully away. You don't want to burn, or you don't want to drop any solder splatter. You don't want any solder to splatter on any other components. So right now we're just going to start by adding more solder. I'm going to skip over this. I'm just adding solder to the motor pads here. Okay, now we have solder everywhere. So the next step is I'm just going to grab my power here. This is my Xt60. I've also added a low ESR capacitor. Now it's really important to add these low ESR capacitor, whether it be right here or on the Xt60 itself. However, I decided to solder it directly here. It's really great for reducing noise. And if you don't know where to pick up some of these, I'll have some linked down below, which are a must-have here. So now what we want to do is I'll go ahead and start with the positive, because the positive is much easier to solder. So now I'm just going to heat up the pad again first. Just make sure it heats up really well. Usually if you're having a really hard time, I'd highly recommend you would increase the temperature. So increasing the temperature does help sometimes. And I might do that right now, actually. I'll increase the temperature just to make my life easier. So I'll increase it to 450 degrees or 430 degrees. So it's 440 degrees Celsius. And I'm using lead solder with flux core. So it's really good to always grab some tweezers with you. And if it gets kind of tough, just come in, apply some pressure, and then add some solder. It would really help. You can get a really nice, good connection here. So I'm going to keep all these errors that I'm doing here, just so you could kind of get an idea of how I go about fixing most of them. So right now this one's not really going into places I'd like it to. So I'm just going to keep the iron on top of it, and I'm going to come in and just drop a little solder. Usually that helps with the heat transfer, and it'll just sink right in really nicely. There we go. Try not to move it for a while. Let it cool down. Alright, so we're going to do one motor together. Now, each motor has 3 wires, and each side has 6 pads. So, you know, you divide it into 4, because I've gotten a lot of messages where people didn't know that. Divide the board into 4, and wherever the 3 pads are, put one motor there, put another motor here, another motor there, another motor there. So every 3 pads put a motor. However, this is where it kind of confuses people, how there's one all the way in the corner. So people just kind of get lost. But usually you'll see like a 1, 2, 3, 4. There's numbers also on the board here. So let's start with this one right there. And I highly recommend you get some, you know, tweezers here, because this will be very, very difficult to accomplish without them. Okay. Hopefully that's good, because I can't see from far. And you'll be like, oh no, this is metal. No, this is plastic right here. These screws are plastic, so don't worry. Alright, so we got one into place, and I'm actually going to go this route here. It'll probably make it look cleaner. It's really nice this way. Alright, so again, I'm going to heat up the pad, and then I'm bring the wire, and then push the wire on top. That crunching sound is the most beautiful sound you'll hear while you're soldering. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing to this one. Heat up the pad, bring in the wire. Beautiful. There we go. Alright, really nice. So now we have 3 done, as you can tell right here. We'll take a closer look at later. I'll see how I want to route these wires here. But yeah, that's one motor done. So I'm going to do the same to the others, and we'll come back and we'll take it from there. So what we want to do is we want to find the back. So this is the back here, as you can tell usually. And then these are numbered most of the time, and it'll tell you how to install it. So if we take a closer look at the flight controller, we see an arrow that should point to the front of the quadcopter. And that's going to connect right here. So let's go ahead and actually we'll connect that in a bit. Let's just drop this into place here. And really nice. Now as you can tell, this is not something you would typically do, but this is what I came up with in order to fit everything, especially with a 30x30 VTX, because I wanted a pretty powerful one. And because, you know, usually the bigger the more powerful, because they just have better heat dissipation. So theoretically they'd be able to output more power for longer because the heat gets dissipated, because the only downfall to most of these things are the heat dissipation here. There we go. And now the ESC, or the motors, are connected straight to the flight controller, and the flight controller is getting power here, and this is really great. So now what we have is this is going to be for the VTX right here, and this is our receiver, and then this is for the camera here. So the camera is going to be connected in the front. Alright, so there we go. I think I'm going to leave the receiver in the back here. It looks really great. And now what I'm going to do, see if you want to take a side view here. So the VTX, or the receiver, is going to sit right here. This is still in the place. Now we're going to start adding everything. So I have these spacers that also came with the stack here, or the Mamba F722 Mini, which is also linked down below. They provide you with a lot of nice parts and some spares also. So I'm going to drop in these plastic pieces right now. Alright, so now the board's into place. I had to do it off camera because it was kind of a nightmare here. But now what I want to do is want to install the camera wire. And this wire is going to stay here later on. This comes with a little remote control that we could change the settings for this guy, since obviously, again, it has a lot of features here. So I want the VTX, I want the MMCX to be on the left side here. Maybe it's not really a great idea because we have the SD card here, but we'll see that. All right, so now the VTX is in place, as you can tell right there, and I'm just gonna connect the connector for it, and there we go. And next thing we need is the antenna here. And what's really nice with these VTXs is they give you these rubber little O-rings, so we can add just like this, and that'll sit in the middle. I guess it'll dampen it somewhat. But before doing that, what we need that 3D printed piece that comes with the frame itself here. And I'm just gonna drop this through just like that, and that'll hold really, really nicely. So we got that into place. Next. Awesome. Okay, great. All right, so I've gone ahead and connected the VTX, also added the MMCX, and now we have a stack that looks like this with the SD card fully visible, the micro SD card for the camera because you can flash it, and we also have the micro USB for the flight controller as well down here, very accessible. And if we ever wanted to change the settings, we can pull this wire out, connect it over. And I'll figure something really nice to do with this wire here so it just doesn't hang around, because it could just pull up over here and a propeller could just smack it. Now for the receiver here, what I'm planning on doing is adding zip ties in a way where it makes it like this, and then I just add some heat shrink on them, but I'll figure that out in a bit right now. And let's plug in the battery, hopefully nothing catches on fire, and we'll take it from there. That is beautiful. That is nice. Everything is running. VTX is running. It's connected. There's the receiver running. Let's see. Yep, it's powering on. So we need to bind it. And awesome. All right, guys. So this is the complete package currently. So everything's put together. Everything is working. I'm going to go fly it right now. And the video footage will be out tomorrow of its flight. However, I'll also be doing a beta flight configuration video just to help people out and doing a bit more beginner friendly stuff, because I think a lot of people I'm getting a ton of emails asking me all kinds of questions. So I'm guessing we do have some new people in. And I want to make sure I try to cover everything, especially with the latest stuff that we have out right now. So, and again, everything's linked down below. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, guys.